for those of you that have listened to the podcast. Just came along for the ride, and I think the fish room tour is tomorrow. We're doing a big, grand St. Louis fish room, which is really pretty incredible. The fish that are represented here in our city from you guys. But anyway, so Charles, I'm going to read a little bit of his bio here. Approaches the hobby as 25 years of aquarium keeping as a scientist first and aquarist second. He has a bachelor's of science in biology where he focused on evolutionary biology and population genetics of vertebrates, and currently is at the Van Andel Institute working with zebrafish. And I think from the podcast he's learned a lot about fish nutrition there, as well as I'm sure other sources, and is going to share a lot of that information with us tonight. So please give Charles a big warm welcome to Massa. Everybody make sure you turn your votes in to the giant pizza box up there.
Tallied up, please.
Did we get him, is he YouTube mic'd? Or should we just trade? Okay, I'll give you this one. This one, just don't put the mics too close to each other. There is a second mic if we have any trouble with that one, but it's directional. It's kind of a pain in the rear. Oh, you can't put these too close together though. That's for YouTube.
This is for YouTube?
Yep.
Is there a preferred way to hold it?
I would clip it somewhere else.
Yeah, you can clip it.
Oh God. Like up here?
Kind of close, but not too close to the other one. Can you tell if there's any feedback, and we'll get comments somewhere?
Yeah, is there feedback?
We get a number of people, by the way. All these speakers go up on our, if you go to our YouTube, and you have to click on live, because really all the content we do is the live content of our speakers. You got the whole backlog, but we get about 200 people watching these every month. From around the world. We've got a guy that regularly joins us from somewhere in Scandinavia. I can't remember if it's Sweden or Norway, but say hi to him. Hi to our friend. But it's really a really cool thing that MassI does to put that out there to the world. And if you miss a meeting, you can go back and see it. I've listened to like Mike Helwig's Live Foods Talk and the Beta Talk probably 3 or 4 times each. Get all the info. Anyway, take it away, Charles.
I'm going to make sure this clicky works. All right. So, can everyone hear me? I'm going to start off with, I'm a kind of person that gets distracted very, very easily. If you have a question, please raise a hand, because if a minute goes by, I will have forgotten my question already. I try to give people the courtesy of asking questions. Let me finish my sentence. I'll point at you, ask a question, and then we can move on. So I'm going to introduce myself a little bit. I had a wonderful intro, but I think it'll help contextualize to everyone how I approach and think about this topic. So I've been keeping aquariums for about 25 years. I started breeding back in 2005. Actually, in this fall, I will be celebrating my 20th anniversary of fish breeding. Got my degree. While I was getting my degree, I did research on metabolism in bamboo shark embryos and what simulated global warming conditions do to them. It turns out global warming is very bad. Just going to throw that out there. I worked at Watercolors for several years. I used to be one of the main co-hosts on the podcast. And then Calder took over my seat. And these days I'm an occasional guest when I feel like it. And I work at the Van Andel East Research Institute, and I help facilitate biomedical research by trying to make sure the fish are healthy, because you don't want them being sick because our environment just sucks. So why does nutrition matter? I'm going to throw out there first off that the really big thing, well, I'll give you some context. This front end is going to be a lot of not fun because I got to lay this groundwork, and then it'll get more fun real quick after that. But nutrition matters because animals and organisms, they can devote energy into 3 main categories, and it's growth, maintenance, and reproduction. And so an extreme example of that would be Pacific salmon. When they go upstream, they start degrading because they put all their chips on reproduction. They stop maintaining their bodies. They literally start falling apart once they go in the streams. So being able to have fish that not only have the energy to grow or maintain, they need to be able to reproduce as well. And so understanding these building blocks of nutrition goes a long way. So when it comes to macro and micronutrients, there's a lot of debate on how to categorize them. I sit in the camp of, I think the most sense makes to have macronutrients be things that need to be grams per kilogram of feed, And then micronutrients are micrograms per kilogram of feed. What was that? Sorry, sorry. So let's start off with proteins. Yes?
Real quick, can you comment on the two metals you have up there, or the two calcium and phosphorus?
Yeah.
The two elements you have there. Can you give us perspective why those are so important over a lot of other elements?
So, yeah, so phosphorus in particular is the backbone to a lot of compounds that are used in biological organisms. And so, sorry, my brain blanked for a second there. Yeah, it's very important for nucleic acids, stuff like that. And then calcium is just important because it's used in so many metabolic functions, like, I don't know, communication between neurons, building bone, XYZ. So like it's in all of your cells. So it's just used at a capacity that's much higher than most other metals. Making sure no one else had a hand up. All right. So let's start off with proteins. So I love memes. This front part of the talk I mentioned is going to be a little heavy, so I try to put in the jokes. So there are approximately 20 amino acids. The big bullet points to take away from that is that for most vertebrates, and I feel comfortable saying most vertebrates because here's the thing that is really fun about working with fish, is teleost fish alone comprise about 35,000 species. That means that there are more species of teleost fish than reptiles, birds, and mammals combined. So most vertebrates are fish. That means you cannot generalize fish, so I'm not going to try and do that here. But essential amino acids mean amino acids that the organism cannot synthesize themselves. They need to get it in their diet. So having an understanding, at least that that's a concept in that environment, is really important. This is the most expensive part of your fish feed, the protein component by far. And this is the part that I think that hobbyists should probably think about being the pickiest about, because since you're putting most of your money into that component, you should care the most about that component. And so there are a lot of protein sources that are considered very high quality and when I say the industry, I mean specifically aquaculture, not like aquarium industry, and I want to be very clear on that. Right now, there's this really stuck in idea that fish proteins are the best protein sources, because the idea is that since it's already fish protein, it's the least amount of work for it to make more fish protein. I would argue that's probably not actually the case. I think we've kind of pigeoned ourselves into a corner there, but sure. The other thing to keep in mind is that protein digestibility can matter a lot. So you will sometimes see on some brands of food, and I'm going to look at these because they're big words, protein hydrolysates or isolates. These are proteins that have been modified in certain ways to theoretically, and I say theoretically, it depends on your fish species, to be more accessible to the fish that are eating them. And I just wanted to put this graphic on there because I found it and I liked it a lot. Here's a bunch of amino acids and what their structure looks like. I don't know. Someone worked really hard on this graphic, and I just think they deserve some attention for that. Lipids. So there's a running gag in a lot of biomedical labs that zebrafish are functionally on a keto diet because they're a species that does not seem to be able to synthesize carbs very well, or if at all. And that seems to be the case with a lot of fish that I imagine that'll carry through to a lot of fish that we keep in the hobby too. With 35,000 species, yeah, there are definitely fish out there that can, but I would say that we're pretty safe with most, assuming that most aquarium fish that we keep cannot digest carbs. So lipids are your main source of energy. You really want that main source of energy to be lipids too, because otherwise they're using proteins as an energy source, which means they can't use those proteins in their diet to grow or make eggs or XYZ, and making eggs is also energetically demanding, so you do need a lot of lipids. It's super fun. So lipids is a category that, if you're not familiar with it, includes like fats, fatty acids, stuff like that. I think that freshwater hobbyists in particular need to start considering looking at like omega-3s, omega-6s, these other fatty acids that like, APAs and stuff like that, because marine fish breeders in particular have really started prodding at these a long time ago, and I think that's given them a leg up on us freshwater hobbyists. I do think that like some of those species that we're struggling to breed, it's maybe because we haven't figured out like, I know it's not a fatty acid, but carotenoids or fatty acids or stuff like these ratios that matter to that species. Carbohydrates. This is by far the cheapest component of your fish food. In most fish food manufacturers, they're actually using the carb component as a filler. I typically try to avoid flake foods myself, in part because in order to get that crisp texture, you need to put in more filler for it to be like that. And so in most situations, if the quality of manufacturing is similar, I will argue that pellet foods are better. There's a reason why salmon farmers committed pretty hard to pellet foods back in like the 70s and haven't looked back. I already mentioned that it can be used as a secondary energy source. In some species, maybe, but the data isn't very good and I wouldn't count on it. All right, this is where I'm gonna start having some actual fun. We got through the hard part, I'm sorry. So this one's really intriguing to me, and I think this is an avenue of experimentation that hobbyists can be doing a little bit more of. So fish have this really funky thing because they live in an aquatic environment, and that means they're living in an environment where a lot of these things that they would need nutritionally are dissolved in. And so they can do something that we cannot do. They can derive nutrition from the environment that they're in. And because they're breathing through their gills, they're taking in stuff, and that blood barrier can be crossed by fish. So there's actually a lot of evidence that, and I've made a whole list of things here, that they can get magnesium, calcium, phosphorus, copper, iron, manganese, selenium, zinc, iodine, cobalt, boron, and cadmium from their environment and not their diet. And there's actually some schools of thought that like long-term chronic diseases in some marine fish, like specific ones, are less common because they are in an environment that has more of these ions in them. And so Seachem has been working on this product called, if you're going to take one photo of this stock, I would take a photo for this paper right here, because this is a review paper that is a quick overview of all things that are known in the literature at this point in time that fish can take from their environment. And this product is actually based off of that review paper. And so the idea here is, everyone's pulling out their phone, I'm so proud of you guys. But this is a product that is based on that idea where like if you're dosing this into their environment, theoretically you should be able to, that your fish should get value from it. And that is really intriguing to me. I see a hand.
So that is for salt and freshwater?
Freshwater. This product is. And they have a couple other products that are called things like goldfish trace, discus trace. That's the exact same product, just different packaging. Seachem has just figured out that like discus people are too snobby to buy regular freshwater products.
Can any essential microbes not be absorbed by fish? Or can they get all of them?
They can get a lot of them through that. I'm a scientist, so I don't like giving affirmative like, oh, all of them, but they can get a lot of them. It's really intriguing. Like their ability to pull things out of the water through their gills is pretty strong. It's really crazy because the part that's even crazier to me is that they're even better at keeping things from escaping through their gills. That's wild. Any more questions about this slide? I was really excited about this one. Just making sure. All right. So ecological adaptations. So I've mentioned multiple times you cannot really generalize fish for the sake of moving at a pace that won't bore everyone. I feel the need to do that a little bit. So I roughly feel like I'm comfortable putting fishes into four main categories: carnivores, organisms that eat other organisms, other animals, herbivores, organisms that are eating plants, omnivores that are eating a combination of both. And I would personally put detritivores into a different category because I think there is some evidence that their digestive tracts function a little differently, but also they're behaviorally a little differently. And I will admit a bias, I've been focused pretty hard on detritivores for about 3 years now. And so I'm just going to put them in their own partially because I like them. All right, so this is a picture of the drawer in my fridge of the different types of foods that I keep. So you can roughly put foods into 3 main categories, I feel like. There's the prepared foods, flakes, pellets, gel foods. I think gel foods in particular are a type of food that hobbyists are kind of just sitting on, because the really intriguing thing to me about gel food is that, so a lot of these prepared foods, since they're so dry, the fish, I'm going to oversimplify this, but they need to like wet it internally, which takes some energy to do, whereas like a gel food, it's already hydrated, like it takes less energy to get at it before they can start digesting it. There are meaty foods like frozen, freeze-dried. I feel like I don't need to sing the praises of frozen foods, and then live foods. And I feel like in this club, of all clubs, I don't really need to explain that. So I think that the thing that people need to do is, there are a lot of specialists here in this club. There's a lot of people who are committed to clades and groups of fish. And so I think that looking at a diet regimen, you need to start thinking of it as like, there isn't a catch-all strategy here that'll work in all situations. There are a lot of strategies that will work fine in most situations. So know your fish, know their habitat, know their diet and their life history. These are really important details. And explore what foods are available to you. One of my favorite things to do when I visit clubs is that I will check out one of their local fish stores, because one of the things that's really strange to me is availability is almost exactly the same in the entire country, but what a local fish store will stock is very regional, because different regions, for some reason, everyone's committed to different types of food. It's very interesting to me. But you can design a regimen that replicates wild diet as closely as possible. So I'm going to give you one really crazy example here. We're going to spend a lot of time on this slide, and I'm going to request some audience participation on this one. So since we work with zebrafish in the lab, I've spent the most time with this fish. I spend 40 hours a week just thinking about zebra danios, and I probably spend about 2.5 hours a day just feeding or making food for them. So they're an omnivore. One of the really cool things about zebra danios is they live in a different type of habitat than other danios. If you didn't know that, they're not native to streams. They're native to rice paddies and like temporary seasonal ponds. And actually during the dry season, they will temporarily move into these streams, and then they'll move back out when it rains again. So they're functionally little tiny bettas that migrate. It's really weird. So we've experimented in the lab with 5 different diet regimens. The first one is the pelletized diet. It's most comparable, this particular diet isn't available to hobbyists. The hobbyist diet that's most comparable to it would be TDO Chroma Boost. We've worked with Tetramin Flake. We've worked with a blend of Tetramin Flake, Spirulina Flake, and freeze-dried Cyclops, and a mixed diet where they get a pelletized diet once a day and live food twice a day, and then a mixed diet where they get a flake blend once a day and live food twice a day. Each of these cohorts were given 3 feedings every day. So we were while working on this, we figured out that there are 2 really interesting ways to look at these fish. And so this is the part where I request that someone will guess. So we had 2 age groups, growing juveniles and adult broodstock. I will give you the hint that the best diet for each of these age classes did better, like in a different diet. The adults performed best on one diet, and the juveniles performed best on a different diet. And there was a specific age point where they seemed to switch, and you should switch their diet. So any guesses what diet the broodstock did best on?
Number 5?
Nope.
Flake one?
That was 3rd place.
Oh, okay. I would have thought the flake would almost break apart in the water and be easier for smaller fish to get over the.
Yeah, it's
So-
honestly, my guess would have been number 4, and that was 2nd place. It's 1. So, and it wasn't even close. So Broodstock fish that were, I'll start at the bottom, actually. Broodstock fish that were on diet 5, the females in each spawning event that they produced viable embryos, they produced on average somewhere around 120 embryos. Number 4, they averaged somewhere around 200 embryos. Number 3, they did around 300 embryos. 250. The tetramin flake, I wouldn't be able to give you a number off the top of my head, so 50% of the time they didn't spawn, and 50% of the time they did produce a spawn, they did not produce any viable embryos. Yeah. Females on this pelletized diet were averaging spawns between 350 and 400 embryos per spawn every single week. Not even close. Any guesses on what diet the juveniles did best on? Number 4. Now, that one was really intriguing to me, and I think this raises a lot of questions that we need to explore. I think that there isn't really a lot of, so let's take a step, I'll take a step back. So like mammals, we tend to get a lot of our gut fauna from like mother's milk, like exposure to that. So perhaps the question we need to start asking is, where's the gut fauna getting seeded in fish? And I think Mike Helweg made in his book a pretty good educated guess, and that I think research needs to explore, is that they're probably getting it from the gut fauna of their food. And so, and for the juvenile fish with a live food component, they were growing about twice as fast as fish that didn't have a live food component. It was pretty stark. And 4 and 5 for the juveniles was almost interchangeable.
What pelletized diet do you use? The thing that's comparable to TDO?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Any more questions on this one?
How did you come to choose freeze-dried cyclops versus all the other freeze-dried?
Good question. I didn't. It's because everyone in the zebrafish community uses this blend and has been using it for about 15 years. And so the idea that we were going with is we wanted to, a lot of labs will just do tetramin or the number 3 diet. So we kind of wanted to challenge and be like, we have better options out there. Go ahead.
So all of the zebrafish and zebra dandies, are they all from tank raised lines, basically, coming off, so domestically bred?
They are domestically bred. I will say that they are different strains than you would get in captivity at this point. So the most common wild type strain of zebrafish in American labs is called the AB strain. And it's called that because back in the 70s, a guy went to store A and went to store B, he got some fish and he started this strain. But these fish have been reproductively isolated from hobbyist strains for 50 years.
Well, I asked because it's interesting that the best diet for them with the biggest brood spawns was number 1, the pelletized diet. So my thought on that is, do you think that would change if you brought in wild fruit stuff?
I don't. I don't. Because in this case, I think what's happening is, and I'm really glad that I was excited about that question. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think we've reached a point. I think the future is now, gentlemen. I think we've reached a point right here, right now, where we are starting to figure out the science of fish nutrition so well that we can produce pelletized foods that are better than live foods. I attended a conference last year that blew me away with some of the results I was seeing, because I know this is saltwater fish, and I'll quickly explain this real quick, but the way that you raise clownfish in aquaculture facilities has not been updated since the mid-90s. And so the main strategy that you do is you would raise them on gut-loaded rotifers for the first 5 to 7 days, and then you would switch them to baby brine shrimp for 5 days, give or take, and then you would switch them to a pelletized food. And if you look at literature back in the late 90s, everyone's we're never going to be able to move away from live baby brine shrimp ever. Everyone was very stuck in this idea. I attended a conference last year, where a lady presented data that she was getting clownfish larvae onto TDO specifically, and this is why I started exploring foods comparable to TDO, not only at a younger age then they could take baby brine shrimp. They were taking TDO as young as 4 days post fertilization, but they were growing faster. They had a higher survival rate, and they had better color than fish that were raised on baby brine shrimp. And that's wild. So this is where we're going to have some more fun. I think the idea, so the rules of the game here is I'm going to present to you a fish I've worked with in the past. I'm going to give you a quick overview of their wild conditions. I'm going to tell you what I fed them, and then I'm going to present the question, did I succeed? And I ask that someone in the audience make a guess, and then I'll reveal what the results of my project was. So, Paris fermentis. I was working with licorice gouramis for several years. Let's move on and say I pretty well replicated their water chemistry. I was feeding moina that were raised with yeast and cold cultured with green water. I worked with 2 different species. I worked with the Nagii and the filamentoses. So, did I succeed in getting anything? No. Yeah, I got nothing. So looking back, I think the problem I was dealing with is that this was before I spent a lot more time working in, thinking in the world of fish nutrition. But I think I did not have enough fatty acids in their diet or lipids. If I was going to do it again, I would probably include baby brine shrimp or something like moina that are gut loaded with the plethora of fatty acid supplements that exist for fish in the hobby these days. I will say, even though I've never gone back and tried it myself, I have given that advice to multiple people who picked up licorice gouramis, and they have successfully bred licorice gouramis. So I think it's a pretty sound hypothesis, but I've just never had the inkling, the desire to go back and try it again myself. I'm just working on other projects, and that's fine. Boop. So this is Pelvicochromis curbensis miliwe. I am going to sing the praises of this fish. This is a female. They produce this amazing purple patch when they're excited about literally anything, whether it's a hot boy or she's excited that I put some new food in that she's excited about. And the males, which I didn't think to put a photo in, they look like a completely different fish. They have a different body shape, they have a different fin shape, they have a different color pattern, they have this weird speckling all through the back and tail. It looks like you have 2 different fish. It's crazy. So they're detritivores. I mentioned I've been trying to work with detritivores for a while. I'm very intrigued with this lifestyle. So this is a fish that would be sifting through the detritus that's on the bottom of stream beds. And I've been trying to replicate that with Cecum chlorelliflakes, New Life Spectrum Algamax, Spirulina gut-loaded brine shrimp. So did I succeed? I see a lot of head nods. I did. And I did include a male. There's a male. Never mind. I do want to talk about this male real quick because I miss him. He was one of the best dad fish I ever worked with. He resulted in some very interesting conversations I had with some West African cichlid scientists because, so this is a wild-caught male who was paired with a wild-caught female. She died a few days before this, and this is him. Perspective is a little off here. He's in a 33 long. He's about 6 inches closer to the camera than the babies are. He's putting himself between me and the babies. What was really intriguing is this male was mouth brooding. And I did not know that was something that Pelvicochromis could do. And I ended up contacting some West African scientists, and they were like, yeah, they do that sometimes. We can't figure out why. It doesn't happen consistently. They're like, yeah, it's in our notes. No one's ever been able to publish any data on it, though, because it's not consistent. But yeah, very good dad. Liked him a lot. Miss him. I'm going to put this up here for some further reading. Amazonas had someone in your own club who produced this amazing article. Someone else in your club produced this really amazing book that everyone should read. I will throw out there any fish farm literature. So a lot of the experimentation I did with zebrafish was actually based off of me looking at literature on salmon farms and I thought, okay, this is a large predatory fish. How do I adapt this idea to a small omnivorous fish? But it's a lot closer than, say, looking at I don't know, how do you raise cows? And then I think that if you're going to read one thing, I think you should maybe look at Standardized Reference Diets for Zebrafish, Addressing Nutritional Control and Experimental Methodology by Stephen Watts. Stephen Watts is this really cool scientist down a little further south from here, and he's been trying to, the zebrafish field right now doesn't have a standardized reference diet for research, so like there's a lot of variability in what labs are feeding, so this has raised questions of like, is the reason you cannot replicate my results because you're feeding something different or because my results were that bad? So he's been on that hill for, I think, 15 years now. I will also throw out there, I was on a podcast for 4 years. I think I was in roughly 185 episodes. That equates to around 300 hours of talking if you want to hear me talk more. I also recently started my own YouTube channel. So I will say the podcast is much more if you're into like husbandry and how to keep fish, where to get them from, stuff like that. In my introduction, it was rightly pointed out that I'm very interested in evolutionary biology and population genetics. That's more of what my solo channel's for. Like right now, I'm working on a video on like what the population genetics of Kimbe Island perculate clownfish is and what that can tell us about how to breed and maintain populations of them in captivity. I'm also going to be on my soapbox for 3 seconds. I have a big beef with salmon farming. It's incredibly inefficient. The example I will give you is that, so salmon are high-tier predators in an ecosystem environment, in an aquatic and marine ecosystem environment. So if we were trying to do the same thing in a terrestrial environment that we're doing with salmon, the best analogy I've ever been able to come up with is if we were raising tigers for meat, but we were going out there and killing wild buffalo to feed them. Like, we already have the buffalo meat. Why are we taking this extra step? It's very inefficient. It's very wasteful. But on top of that, it's really bad for ecosystems. So like, I actually visited Scotland last year. One of the things that was really crazy to me is there are salmon farms everywhere, and they have like almost no wild salmonids because the best place to put salmon farms is in the places that are good habitat for these fish, but these high density of fish that have parasites and diseases and stuff. So like, what's been really fun is that infectious salmon anemia, it started cropping up in Norwegian farm salmon, and it's starting to show up in Pacific Ocean salmons because we've been building farms there. This is really bad for that environment. It's really bad for that temperate rainforest ecosystem. It's really bad for killer whales, which are my favorite animal on the planet. It's really bad for a lot of things.
Is it a pathogen-mediated disease?
That,
The infections.
yeah, it's a pathogen-mediated disease. What's really crazy about it is that like their heart basically starts melting. It's pretty drastic. And so like what you start seeing is wild salmon that are infected with it can't do things like jump over a waterfall. Or, so like they can't even spawn anymore. Like they don't have the like athleticism necessary to do it anymore.
And they don't feed into the system, the ecosystem of the rainforest, which is dependent on their carcasses.
Yes. Like if they don't make it upstream, they're not fertilizing that temperate rainforest. That rainforest is dependent on that, you know, carbon, phosphorus, all the stuff that they're bringing in from the ocean. Yeah.
I'm guessing that's that infection that's cropping up in farm salmon has been passing on to
Yes, because salmon, wild salmon, typically, the way that these salmon farms function is they're in migratory routes. So wild salmon have to swim directly underneath them. And what's really crazy is that if you want to read anything really cool about it, I mean genuinely, is her name's Alexandra Morton. She's a rogue killer whale scientist who started co-opting with First Nation peoples to like use lawyers and stuff to chase salmon farms out of like native waters. It's pretty cool. But if you've ever read any like science or news article about how like salmon that swim by salmon farms get higher loads of sea lice, she's the one who figured that out. She actually would like sample salmon that hadn't passed these farms yet, and then ones that would, and she made a pretty strong correlation that they are picking up these pathogens from swimming by these farms. It's pretty cool. I mean, the science is, like, not that. That's what I got.
How does it impact the killer whales?
So one of them is that salmon are a keystone species in that ecosystem. So there are two main ecotypes of killer whales that live in the Pacific Northwest waters. One of them is called the Biggs ecotype, and they specialize in hunting marine mammals, and most of those marine mammals are hunting salmon. So if their food source is gone, so is the food source for the food source. The other type of ecotype are called residents, and they are salmon hunting specialists. And there's actually a pretty strong correlation between, so in northern Vancouver there's a population, southern Vancouver there's a population. The Snake River population of salmon has been not rebounding at all. That southern population is stuck at around 72 individuals right now and does not seem to be recovering, whereas the Fraser River salmon populations have been rebounding for the last 30 years, and guess what? That population of killer whales has been seeing growth every year in that same time frame. I think in the 70s when the study started, there was 126 identified individuals in that northern population. There are over 300 of them now.
Is there a right or a better way to salmon farm, or is the whole industry?
I think it's screwed. Like, I don't think there's a way to do it well because again, like it's like you're functionally raising marine tigers. Like there's not a way to do that efficient. Like there are ways that you can like if you're doing like if you have to do it, landlocked farms are better because at least they're isolated, but like you're still doing that like inefficient energy transfer. It's like, it's not great. I actually a little hesitant to say this on live YouTube, but I once almost started a fight with a bunch of salmon farmers because someone made a claim that they were like, we're getting a 1-to-1 feed conversion. I'm like, that is impossible. Are you telling me that you're getting them to market in 8 months? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, a salmon needs to eat this percentage of his body weight every week. Like, in order to get them to that weight, it's going to take you like 14 months. Like, that's not how any of this works, but they get a lot of money so they can make claims that like people like Andre would probably never get away with.
What is the main source of protein for the salmon feed?
Wild caught fish. Fish meal.
This is completely off topic. You said killer whales are your favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any idea why they started wearing salmon hats?
Yeah.
Or what the deal is with that?
Yeah, so the trick with them is that they are really intelligent. And so one of the things that's really funky about really intelligent animals is that, and I hate as a scientist say it that way, really intelligent animals just do things. Like humans, like for example, like we have so many affectations. Like why is it invariably almost every society decide that some form of body modification is really cool? Like we just do it. Yeah.
That's all that it said online, so I was like, maybe you know more.
No, what's really strange about it, it was like a fad that popped up like in the early 90s. And then it was like around for like 2 years. All the whales figured out how to do it and they stopped doing it. And then they started doing it again like a year ago. It's so weird.
It was their hammer pants.
Yeah, they were just like, sure, well, it's vintage. Any questions about nutrition specifically? Did everyone learn something? Is everyone going to try TDO Chroma Boost?
What is it about TDO Chroma Boost that's so good?
Yeah, there's a couple different things. One of them is that their protein level is very high. And so one of the things that's been really intriguing to me is I'm going to harp on tropheus breeders for a while. We've been really stuck on this idea that they cannot handle high protein levels. And actually, that's all wrong because most of the nutrition they're deriving from the wild isn't the algae they're eating. It's the periplankton that live in the off-walk. And so they actually have a pretty high protein level diet. The trick is that the types of proteins that they're getting there are very accessible. So a lot of proteins that would like, do I have that backwards? No. So like a lot of proteins that we are typically feeding them are a little harder to get at. And so they would actually start rotting in their gut and that's where they're getting bloat. So the trick isn't how much protein, it's where it's coming from. And so that's another reason why I'm stuck on that. Like, I mentioned it in passing. I'm really quite annoyed that fish nutrition's really stuck on this idea of fish meal as like the ideal, because like most fish don't eat other fish, and so like these. One of the things that's really cool is I mentioned amino acids, but like those ratios of amino acids are different in different food sources. And so some research in the last year has started coming out that's like, what happens if I like, I'm just going to say overdose tryptophan? Does that do anything? No, they don't grow faster. What if I put in a lot of lysine? Turns out this fish species grows a lot faster if you have a high ratio of lysine. So we're getting to the point where we're starting to figure out that it's not just how much protein, it's what the ratios of amino acids in the proteins that matters. But TDO is really intriguing because they have a high protein level of protein sources that seem very useful to a lot of fish. The pelletized diet I'm working with the lab, I was intrigued with because it's got a lot of marine sources of protein, so like shrimp, stuff like that, squid, and that's like, I know like a zebrafish isn't going to be eating squid in the wild, but like the amino acid profile of an invert is going to be closer to another invert than a vertebrate's amino acid profile would be. So it's at least approximating it better.
What about the insect-based foods that become so popular, soldier fly?
Yeah. That one seems to be a mixed bag, actually. So I would argue that I think that bug bites is a very well-made food. Their formula that's using black soldier fly larvae and salmon's probably very good because they're, like I already mentioned how much I hate farm salmon, but the salmon that they're using is definitely like the byproducts of salmon farms. It's the part that we wouldn't eat, so it's at least using something that we would just throw away. But the nice thing about black soldier fly larvae is that they're very sustainable, and you can get a lot of protein with not a lot of energy input. The downside is that some species of fish seem to have an inflammatory response in their gut to black soldier fly larvae, and so I'm like, okay, for some species it seems really good. For others, it's like, maybe not, but again, you can't generalize a fish.
What species do they find that has an inflammatory response?
So you're gonna laugh, and I'm gonna give an answer that's like, basically stuff that we farm to feed ourselves. I wouldn't be able to speak specifically to like, I don't know about zebra danios, but like a lot of the fish that we raise ourselves do seem to have, yes, they do seem to have a response to it. So it's like, I'm a little bit cautious to say it's an amazing protein source because I don't know, but I do know that some fish don't. Yeah.
If I had to send samples of fish food to analyze,
Yeah.
are there analytical laboratories that could tell me not just the percentage, but how big the protein is?
I'm trying to think how to word my answer here. The short answer is no. The long answer is, if you know, this is genuine, if you know a good insect biologist, a lot of them have bomb calorimeters, and that might help you a lot in figuring a lot of that out. The flip side, though, is that like I use the terms good versus bad just because it's like good colloquial. I don't like, that's one of those things that's like everything's on a sliding spectrum. So like at one point do you say everything on this side is good and everything on this side is bad? I don't know. And so like that's the part where like when we're analyzing these things like in the scientific sense, it's really hard to get a hard answer on that.
But if they send it to you, you'll answer.
Just, yeah.
He'll put his address on.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Now, I would imagine it would vary by species, right? So some
It would
might
vary
be
by
for one
species.
But not for the other.
So just kind of among hobbyists who don't breed, I feel like most would say my fish live
Yeah.
on just like basic. So how common would you say like nutrient deficiencies are in just aquarium fish?
I think it's pretty common. We just don't know it because most of our fish live so short of lives. So like, for example, like humans, we live forever. And that's why like we're like, we have all these chronic diseases. And I'm like, yeah, because we spend 80 years for this stuff to stack up. Like a fish that lives 2 years doesn't have that time. But there's a couple like snarky responses I give to, like when I worked in the store, that the example I give is that like I know a lot of people that will respond to you and be like, I have great Planet Aquarium and I never do water changes. And my response has always been, yeah, it would look 10 times better if you did though. And so like that's how I feel about a lot of fish foods, where like anyone that's like, yeah, I'm getting amazing results, I'm getting breeding results with Tetramin, and I'm like, and imagine how much better you would get if you would just switch it out to literally something else. Like I had a conversation with Stephen Watts where he was just like, we're in a world where like we don't need Tetramin. Like I don't know why that's still a norm in laboratory settings.
We're there in the hobby too.
I know. Like we have options. Like it's amazing to me that we have pelletized foods that are better for growing marine fish than live foods. That's crazy.
So, I mean, I would love to change some of my foods to something that would be better. Like when you talked about like gel foods being easier to digest, that suddenly clicked and made sense. However, I have glass cats that won't eat anything unless it's a flake. Is there maybe tips to get fish kind of like that?
Yeah.
Glass cats are more specific because they have to line up
Yep.
and figure it out that way. I couldn't even get them to eat brine shrimp. I thought that would work great.
So
It has to be flake.
one of the things that's been really strange to me is that, like, especially in the last few years, me and Calder have started, we argue a lot about it because he's a little bit more flake friendly than I am. And he's like, you can get a lot of fish on flake food. And I don't disagree with that at all. I think the trick is, and this is part of what, for me, this is like why I don't like flake. Part of the trick with flake is that it's very smelly. And so what it's smelly because it's dissolving really fast. That means that all that good nutrition you bought is dissolving out into your water in a way that your fish might not get, because it's like yeah, they can get calcium, phosphorus and stuff, but we don't have any evidence that they can get proteins from the water column, you know? But I think that a lot of flake foods are really good at getting a good response because of the smell. And I think we as hobbyists need to think about that more. Calder and I have been working with this food called Sustainable Aquatics Hatchery Diet, and it is a stinky food, but I promise you, like almost anything fresh or saltwater will eat it. It's crazy. We've gotten fish that won't take frozen foods onto it. Like, what? Don't you have some crazy butterflies that you've gotten on it?
I had a couple, like, not obligate growlivores, but like borderline obligate growlivores butterflies that take it freshly imported, macrophrygia on their asses, like your leopard asses. They'll take it over live brine shrimp or live food. It's just like it scents and it floats really slowly. It sinks really slowly, so they have a lot of time to think about grabbing the food. Other than that, like maybe not the best quality of food outside of that, but if it gets them eating, like that's
Better than not eating at all.
Yeah, I
That's why I
mean,
like flake.
So that's a food,
Yeah,
that's
flake-
the long way of answering, that's a pellet that I would
But
try.
That is the only thing I've watched them eat.
Yeah.
I've bought many different pellets. You had some, the pellets in the blue.
Oh, the new life
thing.
spectrum?
Yeah, and all of my other fish loved it. Never saw a single glass cat eat it. And I'm like, how do I get these things to eat? And then I'm like, oh, I saw some flakes left over. We'll try that. It's the only thing I ever saw them eat.
Yeah.
And I was like, I thought for sure they'd eat the brine shrimp or bloodworms. They were really, really interested in them, but would not go for it. It's not sinking that much faster. So, yeah.
Tip would be a smaller pellet size. So
Yeah.
I have the smallest pellet size
Yeah.
from the blue ones. I have a couple different pellet sizes, but yeah, it's I
TEO
tried
and
to
New
bring it.
Spectrum go much smaller than what you use. The TEO and the Hatchery Diet are a lot smaller in diameter than a lot of the other commercially available pellets because they're designed for green pondfish. So that makes those smaller pellets seem to be a little bit more palatable.
I've tried grinding some up, hoping maybe just
Yeah. But in fact,
almost a powder would maybe
Yeah.
help, but
Stinky
they didn't
foods.
seem to care. But it definitely seems to be they're almost anxious that they can't quite figure out what it is. But when it's a big old flake, they're just like, I don't care, it's going in my mouth.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the cats,
Like,
you know.
I like to give them something better. So.
I mean, there are good flakes on the market. Like, what's it? Brine Shrimp Direct produces some flakes that I would recommend very highly that if you're stuck on a flake food.
Cool flake,
What was that?
Cool flake.
Yeah, that's what it is. Thank you. Oh, you guys are chatty. I feel like that's either really good or really bad. That either means I didn't explain myself well enough or you guys are that interested.
Let's give a warm round of applause. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.